Hi, I'm Richard Rogers, Senior Minister at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center, and I want to thank you for visiting our website and for tuning in to today's message. If you feel inspired by today's talk, I really encourage you to make a donation by hitting that button below and making a contribution to this ministry. It'll allow us to continue these messages online and to do the great work we do here at Unity of Phoenix, which is to inspire people to live better lives. So thanks for tuning in, thanks for your support, and we hope to see you at a Sunday real soon.
Have you ever done the wrong thing? Have you ever gone the wrong direction, made the wrong turn, made the wrong choice? And have you ever been surprised how much it works? Come on, where are my men? Come on. How many times have you not stopped for directions and you just kept driving and it worked out anyway? Come on, raise your hand. I want to see you, right? So here we are today, and Richard invited us into this series of talks based on things that are counterintuitive. Because one of the things about life is we begin to think we know how it works. And then we find a few people that agree with us the way we think it works, and we go along that path, and then we never really stop to say, does this really work? Does this really make sense? And then something happens in our life, and it's what stops us cold in our tracks, and it really requires us to look at some of our fundamental beliefs and says, does it make sense? I remember a gentleman came to this church one time, and he said, I came to the wrong church. And this place was so outrageous. It was confrontational. It challenged everything I believed about church. And he said, I loved it. He said, I didn't go home. Came back week after week after week because I was used to thinking that church was this way, that this is the way you were supposed to understand God and life and how it all worked out. And he said, that's not what I heard. I heard that I could look at it differently, that I could challenge some of those underlying beliefs, and that it was safe, that it was okay. And what I realized is that my new beliefs made more sense. They actually worked better. Because sometimes just because a lot of people believe it doesn't mean it's the best for you. So Richard has invited us into 4 counterintuitive beliefs. The first one he invited us into was don't try. Right? How many of you were taught to try? And if it didn't work, to try more, to try harder, to try faster, to spend more time, right? The second one that he invited us into was the idea that you're not special. Right? How many of you were taught that you had to be special? That if you're going to get loved or praise or anything that you want, you had to be special. And what if you're not? What if you actually get to be loved even if you're not special? What if you just get to be loved just the way you are? That you don't really have to try and you don't have to be special. And then the one that Reverend Lori did last week was, you're wrong about everything. Now, if you listen to your family, you probably knew that from the beginning, right? But there's a part of our ego. Have you ever argued to be right? Have you ever been upset that you weren't? Right? And over again, there's these underlying beliefs that we hold, that we try, we want to be special, we don't want to admit the times that we're wrong. And then my favorite is the one Richard gave me. And my talk today is entitled, And Then You Die. Woo! Right? And I said, buddy, really? That's where I get to go today, and then you die. Okay, well, that's my talk. Thanks so much for coming. We're going to have another great solo, and then we're going to do the offering and call it a day, right? So what I see over and over again is that a lot of people are afraid of death. And the question that I really have for you today is, how close to death do you allow yourself to get? Do you allow yourself actually to get close to death? Or do you keep death as far away from you as possible? Because I see a correlation here that people that seem to be the most afraid of death want to keep death as far away as possible. But the people that are actually the happiest and the freest tend to actually let death get very close to them. You know, if you look at the people that have had near-death experience and have actually gone over to the other side and come back, what you find by and large is these people are actually free of most fears. That they've actually been to the other side, they've experienced what that's like, and they're no longer afraid of it. Their mind doesn't scare them anymore about that idea because they've been there and they experienced how wonderful it was, and they really didn't want to spend any more time being afraid of what could be because they've been there and it set them free. So if you tell yourself the truth, are you in resistance to death, or have you made friends with death? Is death something that you're comfortable with, or is death something that scares the bejeebas out of you? That's a spiritual term. It's in the Old Testament. And Moses said, "Get the bejeebas out of here." Of all people, I cannot afford to lie. There was a Sunday in the first part of the 2003, I think, where it was an amazing Sunday. The music was fabulous. Ramon was here, did the music. The room was on fire. It was literally one of the best Sundays I've ever had. As I'm getting ready to walk back to lead the benediction, to read the prayer for protection, as we're singing the peace song, everybody stands up to sing the peace song, and a woman about right there stood up and instantly fell over. She died. And she fell into my arms. I caught her as she was heading for the floor, and we called 911, of course. We cleared the room, but she died before she got to the floor. And in that moment, you know, in my career, my profession, making friends with death is a part of your life journey, because you're in and out of so many people's experience, and death over and over again is such an experience. So I went with them to the emergency room. We called her husband. Her husband met us there in the emergency room, and he said, "Richard, what I want you to know, that your church was her happy place. If she could have died anywhere, dying there would have been her favorite thing to do." The next Sunday, I had to share with the congregation that she actually passed and that she just died in my arms. About 3 women raised their hand and said, "Can I die in your arms when I go?" So we had a sign-up sheet that day for that. Right? It's like, because what I want you to see is over and over again, we get to the edge of death and we either make friends with it and we make peace with it, because if we don't make peace with death, we do not live fully. We have this unspoken fear that we dance with our whole life because we're not willing to contemplate what the truth is. How many of you know you're going to die? How many of you think you've made peace with it? About half the room. That's fabulous, right? Because what I want you to see over and over again is that when I have this opportunity to really embrace death. Now, does that mean that I'm talking about encouraging you to die? No. That's not what this talk is about. This talk really is about us making friends with the reality and knowing that your spirit goes on, but your body stops. Your body is clothing that your soul wears for a time, and as clothing it is set aside. And your soul goes on. But I don't want you to live even in an ounce of fear about what's next. Because the good that God has for you is even greater than you can imagine. That your soul is completely safe in the glory of God. But I don't want you missing one opportunity in this life experience to live full out, to live all the good that you've got. Because there is so much good when we quit putting the brakes on and allow ourselves to live full out. Some of you were here in the church when I had 3 life-changing events all at one time within 90 days. My father died, I got divorced, and I left the church all in 90 days. And I literally had no idea what was next. I didn't have a plan. Everything that I knew died within 90 days. And I remember the last service that I did at this church, I was always very conscious about hanging up my suits because I'm cheap and I didn't like to pay for dry cleaning, right? And so when I would be done, I would hang up my suits and I'd put them in the closet and I'd put them away. And that last Sunday, I took off my suit, I took off my shirt, took off my tie, and I just left it on the floor. And I sat on the bed and I didn't think I would ever wear a suit again. That I knew that the life that I had known to that point was completely over. I had 3 or 4 speaking engagements over the next 6 months that I'd already booked out. I assumed that everyone would cancel if I wasn't the senior minister here anymore. To my surprise, no, they said, we want you to come and speak. And I remember when I spoke at Church of Today in Warren, Michigan, and I talked about what happens when your life ends as the way you know it, and what's next. I said there's points in life where we get to the edge of everything we know, where we're standing on the edge, and behind us is the life that we've lived, and in front of us it seems like there's just air. There's nothing there. And there's a human part of us that just wants to camp out there. And even though our soul is saying to step off, our humanity is just saying, shut up. Have you ever tried to shut up your soul? Like your soul's saying, take the step, jump, do what's next. You can do this. And your humanity's going, shut up. I don't want to hear it. It's too scary. It's too overwhelming. I don't want to take the next step. Yet there's something inside our soul that demands it. And I talked about it, what it was like for me to step off, not knowing what was going to happen. And I knew probably 2 things could happen. Either I was going to go crashing into the rocks, which is what my humanity was betting on, or I was going to find out that I had wings, and that as a spiritual being that I really could fly. And that when you end what you know, it opens the room for your soul to do what's next. The Apostle Paul said, I must die daily. And for a spiritual being, that's an interesting thing, because our humanity gets so attached to what the way life is. We get attached to the roles that we play and the jobs that we have and the relationships and all the stuff that we have. We get really attached to it. But the idea of dying daily is that every day I have to be willing to let go of what has been so that I can make room for what God has in store for me. That there's an incredible moment when you step off the life that you know and you get to experience a life that is greater than you could even imagine. And that over and over and over again, we're being asked to step into the unknown. Not because it's easy, but it's what your soul came for. Your soul came to die to the old ways, that you could be reborn in a brand new way. One of the ways, the way that I came closest to death in my own life was on a rafting trip in Colorado. And every summer we'd go up to Colorado, and oftentimes during those trips, the kids would want to go on a rafting trip. And so we went on a rafting trip, and this time the guide talked me into going in a kayak. Now ask me how much experience I've had on a kayak. Like, it was like the dumbest choice I've ever made, right? He said, in 2 minutes I can get you up and going and you'll be great. Yeah, right? So the family's all tucked into the rubber raft, the 6-person raft, and I get in this kayak. He gives me the 2-minute lecture on how to do it, hands me a life jacket and a helmet and the paddle, and says, go, I'll be right there. So I'm happy little guy, man. This is it. I'm living the dream, baby. I'm going down. Well, we went into a hole, and I was supposed to avoid the hole. I was supposed to go around it. And somehow I just got sucked in. You know what a hole is? A hole is when the water goes down in the Colorado River, or any river really, the water goes down, comes back around, and then falls back upon itself. So then you have the water coming down the river, and then you have the water spinning around, coming back. So if you get in the hole, it can hold you there. And you can spend months and... You can spend months, and you can't breathe months, but you can spend months in that hole. And I was in the bottom. I was actually sitting on the bottom of the Colorado River. And the guide pulled the raft over. They were out ahead of me, pulled the raft over, and they watched my kayak go down the river. Then they watched my paddle go down the river, and there was no me, right? There was nothing. And the young kid that was our guide was an ex-YOUer from St. Louis. He grew up in Unity. And as he's running back up the river to try to help me, he's got his little life thing and his little lifeline to throw at me. He's got everything. His dominant thought is, if I kill a Unity minister, my mother's never going to speak to me again. Right? So I'm at the bottom of the river, and I try to push up with all my might to get to the surface. And there's just no way. I can't push up against that much water. And the voice in my head is saying, surrender or die. And what's interesting about the voice in my head is it wasn't nervous about it. Like there was no emotional tone to the voice going on within my head and my heart. It was just my soul speaking the truth to me in the most non-panicked way imaginable. Surrender or die. And so I had to try one more time, right? So again, I pushed up off the bottom and I tried to swim and get as far as I can, and there was just no way I could break the surface. My mom is here, and she taught all of her kids how to body surf at a very early age. By the time we were 5 or 6, every one of us knew how to body surf. And the premise is that if you get in trouble when you're body surfing, if you go limp, if you go completely limp, there won't be any resistance to the water, and you can pretty much almost survive any big wave, because if you go limp enough, you just roll with it and you come out and you can actually survive amazing things. And I knew as I lay in the bottom of the river that my only choice was to go completely limp, was to just give up, surrender, to make peace with death. I had to do it because I knew if I tried, I was never had the strength to push against that much water. So I laid on the bottom and I just completely relaxed. And I really thought I was going to die. And I could feel the water come underneath me. And then before I knew it, I broke the surface. And I got one breath. I mean, I just got one breath. And then I was pulled back under. And then I popped back up, and I got one more breath. And then I was pulled back under. And I don't know how long that went on. But the next time I was aware, I was about 150 yards from where I started. And I lived. And what I know today, what I know to be true, is that experience happened the year before we built this church. And career-wise, that was the toughest year of my life. And I had to be willing over and over again in that year to surrender to God. How many of you have ever been in a hard experience that you resisted and made it much worse because you resisted? Right? I think it's a human condition. But the reality is that when we make peace with death, when we make peace with surrender, when we make peace with letting go, our life gets better and better and better, because the good that God has for us has no limitation. But when we hang on to the old ways, and sometimes we white knuckle it and hang on with everything we have, we over and over again suffer more than God ever intended us to suffer. So you ready for your homework? So your homework for today is, as we go through this series and as we conclude this series, I want you to look at one area in your life that you know you need to let go. One area in your life where you know you need to surrender. One area in your life where you know you need to die to the old ways. One place where you know that it's time for you to die so that you can be reborn. We're about to go into the Easter season. And the Easter season over and over again is a reaffirmation that as you let go, as you die to the old ways, you will be born again. It's not easy. Sometimes it's the hardest thing we ever do. But it really is the message that God can't do greater things in your life till you are willing to let go of what has been. And as a culture, we get very, very committed to the old ways. I trust God. Will you say that with me? I trust God. One more time, like we actually mean it. I trust God. So what's one thing in your life that you know you need to let go of? That you need to die to? That you need to release? So that God truly can do something amazing for what's next. Will you pray with me? I want you to open your mind, your heart, your soul to the activity of God that is right here, right now. That we are wildly, wonderfully, richly blessed. And every day we die to the old ways. We die to the old beliefs. We die to the old understandings. We die to what has been so that we can be born again in the goodness of God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. And so it is. Amen. God bless you all. Have a great week. Thanks for being here.